My dream is privacy as a default. It's that everyone that is using crypto can decide if they want to be private. The privacy rights of people are eroded, and you're forced to hand over to information to the government to access things which were previously available. I strongly believe that privacy is a human right. I think if we had more privacy in crypto, it would make crypto safer and more secure if it's done in a responsible way.
Privacy on blockchain is often misunderstood. Too often it gets links to shady activities, but some people believe privacy can be safe, legal, and an essential part of blockchain ecosystem. Today, we are diving into a project that shows how we can do that. Welcome back to Ecosystem Project Demo, a podcast where we explore open source projects, public goods, and funding initiatives that strengthen the Ethereum ecosystem. This is episode 24, brought to you by ECH Institute. I'm your host, Pooja Ranjan, joined by Valeen and Akash from the team. We recently came across this project enabling compliant on-chain privacy. It promises to provide an infrastructure that excludes illicit actors while preserving privacy for legitimate users. How is it possible? Well, to explain this, we are joined by Nathaniel Fried from ZeroXBow, the team building privacy pools and tools designed to enable private transactions while keeping out illicit actors and ensuring compliance. Welcome, Nathaniel.
Thank you very much. Very excited to be here today.
Thank you for joining us. I understand today's topic is very interesting. I know I'm not alone in this, and there are many other people in the blockchain space who are curious to learn more about your project and what it means for everyday users. But before we dive into that, I would love for our listeners to get to know you a little bit. So let's start with when and how did you first learn about blockchain, and what led you to get involved with the privacy in blockchain?
That's a very interesting question. My background is not necessarily conventional crypto background. I've got a long history building intelligence companies for the British government and funded by the GCHQ here in the UK, and working in the US as well. And I've always had a fascination with crypto space, and I've known for a long time a great investor named Zach Cole. I've known him for 10 years. He now runs a venture studio called Number Group, and he was the one that really got me interested. He is a former Marine and was involved in cryptography for the US military, but also had a lot of experience working in the infosec space, which is where I kind of began. And as we went on, I went more into the GovTech side and he went more into the crypto side. But we worked together on a couple of interesting projects. My favorite being Code for Arena, which I was on the founding team of, which was smart contract auditing. Worked there for a couple of weeks, got paid in tokens, which are now worthless, but hey ho, that's the game. And then when privacy pools came up as a project and an idea following the sanctions on Tornado Cash, it was something that I was very interested in because I very, very strongly, partly because of my background, there's this weird kind of group of people that have built some pretty spooky surveillance tech, but I also very, very strongly believe in, privacy for the good guys. And this was a project which I felt very strongly about. So I jumped in, got involved and worked with him and Amin as all three of us as co-founders to see if we could build a compliant version of privacy tech for crypto that's not going to end up funding Kim Jong-un's nuclear weapons program.
Very interesting. I understand there are certain people in the ecosystem who can never stop at anything, and they are always eager to help the ecosystem make it even grow, make it as compliant as possible. Thank you for sharing your story. It really helps set the stage why privacy matters. And it's just not in theory, but also in practice. With this background, maybe we can get on to what is the project ZeroXBow itself. I understand you have got a presentation and a demo, so without further ado, let's get into it.
Thank you very much. So privacy pools came from an academic paper, which was written by Vitalik, the co-founder one of the founders of Ethereum, and Amin Salami, who was around Molak DAO, which funded Tornado Cash, and also Chainalysis, which is a a crypto intelligence company which helps find illicit actors. And the idea of it was that users want privacy, but so do threat actors. There's no just getting away from that. Like if you look at the people that have historically used privacy tech, there's a lot of innocent people, but there's also, North Korea, there's Lazarus Group, there's, people that have stolen funds and want to clean those funds or launder those funds for some pretty heinous real world crimes. And so the challenge of the privacy pools paper was, can we build a version of on-chain privacy which doesn't allow criminals, hackers, terrorists to launder money through? And it's tricky. Like even the conventional finance system gets abused. You look at the fines that HSBC and Deutsche Bank and others have received for allowing the cartels to deposit money with them and turning the blind eye when they're making money. It's not a simple problem to solve, but this is hopefully a step in the right direction. And so we really set out to build privacy pools to give privacy to the good guys and just to the good guys. And it's really important because there's a lot of privacy tech which you don't need other people involved. If you think about encryption, you can encrypt your hard drive and personally get the benefit from that yourself. You don't need anyone else involved to do that. But when it comes to privacy, if you're one person and you set up a crypto privacy protocol, it's obvious that all the money's coming in is you and all the money coming out is also you. It's not a privacy protocol without a large, what we would call, anonymity set. And so when you're using privacy protocol, you're essentially gifting privacy to the other people that are using that protocol. So if me and a friend use a privacy protocol, then it's 50-50 on the money coming out if we're following correct operational security when depositing and withdrawing, but you're gifting privacy to them. And there's not many people I know that want to be gifting privacy to North Korea or hackers. And so that was really the motivation of the challenge, because crypto privacy is quite a novel approach to privacy versus something like encryption. So a lot of people ask me about why you should care about privacy. There are some people which are very, very bought into privacy, but the vast majority of people don't really think about it and don't really care about it. And there's really two dynamics to this. There's, if you're like me, sitting very comfortably in North London in a relatively, good human rights record country, you're going to have a different understanding of privacy versus if you're in another country. But we can all agree that there's definitely been a big trend of criminals targeting people that they see on chain, have got a lot of money, and literally walking up to them with wrenches or kidnapping them or trying to cut their fingers off in the case of Ledger and extort money out of them. And privacy tech can prevent that. At the moment, if you send me crypto, then I can see all of your historic transactions. I can see you moving money around, and we're increasingly getting very powerful analytical tools, although are very useful for investigations and are useful for understanding the blockchain, also enable kind of less sophisticated threat actors to be able to quickly profile and understand people. And there's, the pseudo-anonymous is becoming less and less. Then there's also, if you're operating under a hostile regime, people don't realize it, but a lot of the money that goes towards activist groups ends up or is donated via crypto just because it's slightly harder to trace. There's a lot of people that believe that it's an absolute human right to have privacy, and I'm one of those people, but I'm also aware that not everybody thinks that. But it kind of depends on the country and the lived experience you've had about your views on privacy. But privacy is one of those things where everybody takes it for granted until it begins to get taken away. In the UK, where I am, we just have the Online Safety Act, which just got passed by our current government. It was brought in by the previous Conservatives, but passed by the Labour government, which means that you have to upload your ID if you want to look at any website which might be deemed to have 18 plus content on it. And it's designed as a child safeguarding act, which makes sense. I don't think anyone's going to argue against the mission of trying to protect children online. But it's already, because of the incredibly high fines that you get if you don't comply with this act, it's already meant that like a bunch of pretty politicized protests about immigration in the UK, about crime in London specifically, have been censored on Twitter, just because Twitter, or X now, didn't want to take the risk. And so as kind of like the privacy rights of people are eroded and you're forced to hand over to information to the government to access things which were previously available, I think we see people caring about it more and more. But it's often, with a lot of these things, it's hard to care until you really, really have to care. But anyway, here is exactly how privacy pools works. So privacy pools is a relatively simple system. Anyone from anywhere in the world can deposit money into privacy pools. You can do ETH, you can do stable coins, whatever you want. Well, we're adding more. And when you deposit, there's vetting periods. So we're relying on, Chainalysis, Elliptic, those type of intelligence providers to do something called KYT, which is not KYC. It's know your transaction. So it's looking at where those funds come from. If they come from somewhere where I would say is like known good, like you've been KYC by Coinbase or you've got a long track record and it's really easy to ID you, then it's very fast to get accepted. If you're essentially getting accepted by an automated system. If it's slightly more complex, then there's some manual vetting involved. If you're known bad, like on the OFAC list, or the money's laundered or something like this, then you'll get rejected. If you get accepted, you'll get added to what we call an association set, which is really just a whitelist. And then you can withdraw privately to another address and gain privacy. It's a non-custodial system. So whether you're pending, accepting, whether you're accepted, whether you're declined, you can always do what we call rage quit, which is withdraw the deposit back to your original depositing address. So obviously not getting privacy, but we're not holding onto your funds. It's completely non-custodial system. So with most things, cool little graphic I've got on screen here, but much better to show rather than tell. So I will now give you hopefully a live demo, which always work out. So this is privacypools.com, and privacypools.com is hopefully very, very simple to use. You can create an account pretty easily. You just click on load an account or create an account, click on create an account, and then you can download and copy your recovery phrase and then verify and go through the process of creating an account. It takes a couple of minutes. I won't run through that process for you, but you can also load in accounts, which I will do now because I have previously set up one. So once you have your account, you can deposit into it a massive range of assets. We're adding more. If you've got assets that you want us to add, just let us know. We're more than happy to do that. But today we're going to be working with USDT. And so it's very easy to deposit. You just click on deposit. There is some minimums and maximums, and we charge a relatively small vetting fee to deposit in, but I'm going to put 1,000 USDT out of my 3.2 in, and I'm going to deposit. No fee charged on this, and we will see if this process works. We tend to waive the fee for assets when we've added them relatively recently, and we added USDT relatively recently. So once you deposit your funds, they'll come up as status pending. And so if I click on the dashboard here, you can see this is my fourth deposit into the pool and the status is pending. It says estimated period up to 7 days. Normally it's like 30 minutes or an hour or something like that. Depends on how often the Merkle route gets republished, but times may vary depending on how many deposits you've done and your kind of risk profile. But normally once they're approved, you can then click on the three dots next, or you can click on withdraw, and you can then relay these funds to a new and separate address. For those that remember Tornado Cash, you had to deposit 1, 10, 100 ETH in. You can deposit any amount in and you can withdraw any amount. So if you're, for example, running payroll for a business and you don't want employees to know the amounts their individuals are getting paid, you can maybe put like 100 ETH into their pool and then slowly withdraw like 1.2 or whatever every month. But I'm going to send these funds to this address. I'm going to withdraw. One also issue you potentially have is if you're withdrawing something that's not ETH, then you're going to need gas. And so you can also withdraw the, say, 1,000 USDT, and we'll also send a little bit of gas with it so that you can do, a swap and a transfer in that new wallet if it's a completely new wallet setup. There is a small relay fee, in this case, like $1 for 1,000. And the way the system works is it will generate the proof, it will handle all of this stuff for you, and then it will relay the funds. And so we'll try and follow this transaction and see how long it takes. If you have deposited and then been rejected, or you've deposited and been accepted but don't want to relay the funds to another address, or you've been declined, you can always rage quit, which I will also demo the functionality. But you can see this withdrawal has gone ahead. It's been relayed. I didn't send any gas with it, so that money is now stuck there, but hey ho. So for example, this previous deposit here, which was yesterday, has been declined by the ASP. So that doesn't mean that the funds are stuck in limbo. You can always rage quit at whatever stage. You just click on exit. You have to pay the gas yourself, but you'll withdraw to the original depositing address. So it's a completely non-custodial system. And we've designed it in a way where hopefully it's relatively simple and relatively intuitive, and we'll definitely add more assets and more chains as we go on, but we're working on kind of increasing the anonymity set size. So we added Tether pretty recently, and you can see there's only like a couple of thousand USDT in the pool. Whereas if you look at ETH, it's been around for a little bit longer, and there's deposits every day and 300 ETH sitting in the pool. Because obviously, if you deposited 1,000 ETH into the pool and then withdrew 1,000 ETH, it would be fairly obvious who was who. And so building up that anonymity set is very important as far as building an actually privacy enabling tool. I hope that all makes sense.
It definitely does. Thank you so much for this great presentation. I can see a lot of hint of Malak. Rage quit is there. Definitely some effect of Amin. By the way, we are personally thankful to Amin. When we started, Amin was one of those good guys who helped out with Malak and helped us sustain as Ethereum cat heard us. So thank you and kudos to all the team members.
Yeah, Amin is a very nice guy. Although he's had a big kind of ideological shift from being a privacy maximalist to maybe something more aligned with me now.
Yeah, that is great. Like he is always doing some good work around the ecosystem. So I'm always happy to follow him. Cool. You have probably answered a few questions that I had on my list. So I will go there one by one. But this was simply great. When we say enabling compliant on-chain privacy and we are excluding illicit actors, that is a bold statement, but by following the demo, it seems it is very much possible. I have a quick question with respect to validation of a wallet. You mentioned about vetting the wallet, right? Be doing KYT with analysis, maybe going through a FAQ list to remove the illicit party, going through good whitelisted list to select the parties. Do we do it for both the wallet, like sender and receiver, or is it for just the sender?
Yeah, good question. So it is just the depositing wallet. So the idea is when you deposit into privacy pools, we look at not really the wallet, but like where the funds came from, because arguably that's more important because you just, spin up infinite wallets. And in terms of categorization, it's fairly easy to categorize known good. Like this wallet is, Vitalik's wallet. That's easy to identify. It's also relatively easy to identify known bad. And together, known good and known bad make up kind of 80% of all of the flows of funds that are being used. Today, it's like this kind of middle area, which is a bit more complex. And we tend to lean on the side of caution. I think it's like not worth, taking the risk of being like, hey, maybe this is not stolen funds, but it's kind of following a pattern of behavior that might be stolen funds. And so we tend to be cautious. And, if then someone tweets us, we're like, hey, go deposit in Coinbase, and then you'll be able to send it to us, and that will be fine. But we're only doing it on the depositing address. It's similar to like a bank or like you giving cash to someone. You don't have any responsibility for, once the money's left your ecosystem, what it's done with, what people do with it. A differentiator between us and some of the other privacy protocols which have tried to implement the privacy pools paper is you can update the ASP. So if, someone withdraws funds and then, 6 months later they donate it to Hezbollah or something, you can, that wallet will then get flagged as, illicit for, future people coming in, and you can go back and regenerate proof and say, hey, my funds do not come from those tainted funds which managed to get through. And then everybody going forwards can also like prove that, against this updated ASP, which is a differentiator from us to say like Railgun or some of the other privacy protocols where they potentially have this issue that once the pool is tainted, it's tainted forever.
That is good to know. But I was just thinking if we can validate both wallets, sometimes there are some bad parties, they try to cheat people, even if these funds are transferred using privacy pool and the receiving party is bad party, and we can perhaps stop that. That would be a great achievement.
It would. There is like limitations to the technical capabilities. Like if you look at traditional finance, obviously they're collecting KYC at almost every stage. Crypto doesn't do that. We're not collecting KYC, and so we have to rely on other intelligence solutions to be able to successfully vet. But there is like you want to push you want to develop a system which is at least as good as the intelligence capabilities of law enforcement, and law enforcement uses chain analysis and elliptic and those other intelligence providers. And I think going beyond that is something we would love to do, but potentially impossible at the moment.
That is great. Well, my next question is with respect to ASP that you mentioned. So ASP is something that we are using here to kind of create trust. How does ASP conduct real-time monitoring and vetting without compromising users' privacy?
Yeah, good question. So the ASP really is ZeroXBow. Like we're providing the ASP list of privacy pools, which is an open source project. You can go check it out on GitHub and see all the code. And essentially all we're doing is we're generating a whitelist, and we're not collecting any PII. We're just vetting wallets into essentially three categories, like known good, known bad, and unknown. And unknown ones, we then manually try and identify if those are illicit funds, but there's no kind of personal information involved in that vetting process. We're not asking people to upload passports. We're literally just looking at like, hey, here's everything on chain that is accessible to anyone. You deposit into our smart contract, so you've given us consent to look on Etherscan or like use whatever solution. And we're not trying to ID the person behind it. We're trying to ID the source of the funds.
That's great to know. Yeah, of course, we would like to know the source because we want to make sure that they are good and clean. You mentioned about wallet. I want to understand from a normal user point of view, how easy it is to use this tool. Would it be possible to just make use of simple wallet, MetaMask or any other wallet, and we go ahead and create an account? That account very much looks like a wallet on the tool itself. So what does a normal transaction look like, acting with a normal wallet or any specific one?
Yeah, so you can connect, any wallet you want and deposit from it, MetaMask, whatever you want. And then our website is really like just the interface to the smart contract. So if you're feeling tech savvy, you can go mess around and deposit direct to the smart contract. But also in the user interface, you can just, it's relatively intuitive. You just deposit funds and then you can withdraw partial amounts of that deposit, or you can just withdraw it all. I would advise there's some kind of privacy best practices which people don't necessarily always realize. So depositing really unique amounts and then withdrawing those exact same unique amounts is going to break your privacy if you deposit like something very specific and then withdraw. So that was the reason why Tornado Cash allowed 1, 10, 100. But you can deposit say like 20 ETH and then pull out like 2 ETH at a time. No one's going to figure that out. It's also worthwhile leaving funds in the pool for a decent amount of time. People can see when the Merkle route was updated. So if you deposit, wait an hour for the Merkle route to be updated and then withdraw, you might be the only person that withdraws in that time. And so, someone that was trying to track it back to you might be able to. So there is like some privacy best practices to follow, but I think like the platform's relatively intuitive and it's, you can connect with anything and most of the mainstream assets are on there. But we're adding more. Do let me know if anyone wants additional assets or additional chains for us to launch on. We're always keen to collaborate.
Of course. I hope that people listen to this conversation and reach out to you. Well, my next question is with respect to fees. It seems like a premium service. Of course it is, because it is trying to keep your privacy in place. You mentioned about a few fees, vetting fees, relay fees. Are there any other service fees that people should be aware of? And part two of this question is, all these fees are there for every transaction or it is for only specific kind of transactions?
Yeah, so when you deposit, you will pay a vetting fee, which is 50 basis points. It's waived for most of the new assets that we've added. So if you go today and deposit Tether or USDT or USD1 or whatever you want, then you won't pay that vetting fee. If you do it in like a week's time, then maybe you will. But at the moment, it's not progressive. So you pay the vetting fee, whatever amount you deposit, but we will eventually make it progressive because obviously if you're depositing 100 times from the same address, like we don't have to vet those funds every single time. And so it costs us less. And so we will make it a progressive system, but that's something that will require some smart contract shenanigans, which we will eventually work out. And then when you withdraw, if you rage quit, then you just pay the gas fee. If you want to use Relayer, if you're relayering ETH, then you pay a pretty low, I think like 0.25% relayer fee. Don't quote me on these numbers, it might be higher. If you relay with, say like you're relaying Tether to a new address and you want to send ETH, then the fee might seem high. It might be like, depends on the amounts you send, but it might be like 3%, but like 2.8% of that is the ETH that they're sending along with. So the relay fees are relatively low. And most of those fees go towards funding the KYT. So making sure you're not giving privacy to illicit actors and making sure that the only people that you're associating your transactions with in the association set are clean and good. And so we're not making, no one's driving a Lambo around here.
That is good to know. And this gas fees that we are talking about is just the transaction fees, which is normally charged. Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
sounds good.
It's quite high because it's on ETH, but we will eventually launch on other chains.
Yeah, I understand there could be an improvement feature. I'm just sharing if you guys find it interesting. Right now, you're suggesting that only ETH has to be added, but with EIP 7702 in place, there are different options. You don't necessarily have to pay it from ETH. You can make it enable that any asset, say, for example, you're using USDT, should be able to pay gas chain. So
Yeah, that would be. I'm excited for this because that will make things a lot easier. Because it's a real pain for the relayers to like build out this system that dynamically sends the right amounts.
right. Well, as much as compliant on-chain privacy sounds complex, the programmable compliance sounds so powerful. I would love to hear from you an example of how enterprise or institution in different jurisdiction might configure their own compliance level.
Yeah, so this is a very interesting question, and there's some very strong arguments for why enterprise players might want privacy, and also there's some complexity in it. So if you are a hedge fund or an institutional investor for a family office or something like this, one thing you really don't want is your alpha leaking. You don't want people knowing where you're investing. You don't want people knowing what startups you're funding, that type of stuff. And so privacy solutions can be very useful for that. If you are in pretty much any Western country, you're going to run into, and a regulated entity, you're going to run into some really tricky compliance issues. And so I don't think the privacy ecosystem is quite there for most institutional players, especially regulated institutional players, which are the ones with the serious bucks. A lot of it comes down to counterparty risk. And even if, you have a long list of known good people that you're associating with, regulators oftentimes won't understand that nuance and will just want to know, who are you trading with or who are you associating with. And so I still think there's a little ways to go towards building privacy tech that will make the enterprises feel comfortable. And one interesting thing to think about is building privacy pools or privacy protocols which only allow institutional investors in. And so I think it's relatively okay if you had like a list of 50 different institutional players which were all depositing notable amounts into one privacy protocol that only they could access. Then you're reducing the counterparty risk stuff, and that might potentially work from a compliance standpoint. But a lot of this stuff has to be like taken to regulators, and you have to get pretty big institutional buy-in from consultancies to help advocate on your behalf to banks, and everybody knows banks are famously slow. So I think it is coming, and I think it will unlock a lot of capital for DeFi, but I think it's a slow process to get there.
So we are not there yet, but it would be a good position to be there one day. A follow-up on this one, is the team currently in conversation with the regulatory bodies or some groups which are actively talking to regulators and help in framing some kind of laws around privacy pools, or help these tools, those are responsible for finance, especially in blockchain domain?
Well, as my cousin, Sam Bankman-Fried, no, he's not my cousin, but as he found out, working with governments and regulators is a double-edged sword. And so although previously we used to hold MSB licenses in the US, we had lots of chats with regulators whilst Biden was in charge, because we were very concerned and wanted to make sure that we were on building stuff that was genuinely compliant and was genuinely going to not draw the ire of regulators. And we currently do talk to investigators. We're very interested in making the vetting process stronger, better, more accessible to law enforcement and other agencies, but we don't directly talk to kind of the financial regulators, although did meet them at some conferences around privacy tech that we were invited to in the UK, and they seemed open and keen to engage in conversations around this, just because there is already large amounts of capital flowing into the privacy ecosystem. I think like Railgun does billions every year, Tornado Cash still does pretty sizable amounts, and so people are using it, and regulators essentially have the choice whether they can engage with people that are trying to make it compliant or ban it. And I really hope they engage with people that are trying to make it compliant.
Yeah, I recently came across a set of people who are helping make a regulatory bodies some kind of recommendations with respect to blockchain ecosystem. It's basically a non-profit organization in the United States, so perhaps getting in touch could be useful in future.
Absolutely. I think there's some great kind of advocacy organizations. One that I know is Web3 Privacy. Mm-hmm. They do some great advocacy work around privacy specifically, whilst, they're like the palatable face of the cyberpunk movement that is Web3 privacy, which can be very useful for engaging with regulators.
Surely. Well, I understand that enterprise are self-sustained. They can take care of these kind of regulatory bodies and may be able to deal with auditors, but that cannot be the case for everyday user. So for an everyday user, What happens if they use this privacy pool, but regulators later say that the tools are now restricted? Are their past transactions still be safe and compliant, and how can they prove it?
Yeah, this is a good question. So we're actually working on an interesting project, which maybe I should talk about, maybe I shouldn't. But there's a lot of funds caught in Tornado Cash currently, which people are willing to essentially dox themselves to law enforcement to be able to withdraw from. They can prove they're not, Lazarus, or they're not hackers or anything like this. And those funds are trapped in Tornado Cash for a variety of reasons. A lot of them is like, okay, it's like $5,000. Can I be bothered to go through this process of trying to talk to FinCEN and get my funds out? Is it going to cause issues for my future banking? And I think there is a solution to this around, which involves generating association proofs and generating proofs using the existing Tornado Cash infrastructure. But we'll see what happens there. The regulators, in my mind, I think have like a hit list of damage that organizations are potentially doing to society. And with Tornado Cash being unsanctioned recently, I think it's relatively unlikely that they would come after the privacy protocol, which is trying its hardest out of all of the privacy protocols to be compliant. I think there's easier and softer targets to go after before anyone would come after us. But of course, it is always a risk. So we're essentially not collecting any information or storing any information beyond the intelligence that is gathered during the KYT process, which is just what's on chain and no PII. And so I don't think there's any chance that if there was issues with regulators, it would come back to bite you. It also doesn't really tend to be the regulators which come after privacy protocols. It tends to be law enforcement and the DOJ that goes after these type of protocols, and they go after the people behind them versus the people that use them. So I'm screwed, not the users.
I hope you are not as well trying to help the community, so you should be protected as well. Well, I understand integration is key for ecosystem growth. And I'm trying to also understand here, how can other privacy protocol or layer 1, layer 2 network adopt and implement ASP in their own environment?
Yeah, I mean, the dream for me is like privacy by default. I think there's so many people which would like privacy if it was 1 click. They don't want privacy if it's 3 clicks. And so the dream for us is if you are running a DeFi protocol, you just give people the option to, if they're, you're doing something that's yield bearing, when they deposit, they can deposit via privacy pools. And then when they withdraw, they're privately withdrawing. That's the absolute dream for me, is that every ecosystem has privacy as hopefully a default option, but it costs, so it should probably be an opt-in option. That would be the absolute dream for me, to be honest.
Yeah, privacy by default would be great to have. It could be like a seatbelt that people are wearing and going ahead in their daily life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, looking ahead, are there any particular partnership or enterprise pilot projects or ecosystem integration that you are more excited about in the near future?
Yeah, good question. So I think the exchanges are the most interesting people to work with, also because a lot of them have, I don't know if you know the Ethereum attestation service, and then you have like additional ones built by other exchanges where you can have an NFT that basically says I've been KYC'd. That type of stuff could make building privacy pools just for, say, users of Coinbase or users of Kraken or users of another exchange really cheap, and the exchanges could run the relayers themselves, so there's no need to involve a third party, and they've got the PII, so they're like already have the liability of relaying funds when you withdraw. And so I don't see any reason why you wouldn't want to have, privacy pools that were built for just Coinbase users or just Kraken users, or if they're happy with each other's standards, combining them together using the attestation services. I think that would be really cool, because that's where a lot of like the, beginner users come. And I think if you were withdrawing from Coinbase, you could see 2 options, withdraw and withdraw privately. I definitely click withdraw privately, and I think that many other people would as well. And I think it will be a good introduction to the idea or education around how not private crypto is.
That is good to hear. And being on the same place, I would like you to invite to maybe share a few words from the ecosystem. How do you see this privacy thing going on with the ecosystem, and what are your big dreams?
Yeah, good question. So I strongly believe that privacy is a human right. I think if we had more privacy in crypto, it would make crypto safer and more secure if it's done in a responsible way. I know there's dangers to it. We've seen those dangers. There's developers in jail for maybe the right reasons, maybe the wrong reasons, but definitely for not realizing how serious crypto is. And I think crypto is serious and deserves privacy. And so my dream is privacy as a default. It's that everyone that is using crypto can decide if they want to be private. And I think there's big appetite in the ecosystem. There's amazing developers at loads of privacy protocols. There's loads of exchanges and loads of DeFi projects and different crypto projects that believe in this and are willing to both put time, effort, and funds behind this mission. And so I think the ecosystem is incredible, and the privacy space is cool and cyberpunk, but also like has grown up and matured since the days of Tornado Cash.
Indeed, it has grown up a lot. And I think this is really good parting words, privacy by default. A big thank you to you, Nathaniel, for walking us through how privacy pools and ASP are helping to make on-chain privacy both safe and compliant.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And one final thing I would also note is in traditional finance, you have privacy. You've got the Banking Secrecy Act. In crypto, we don't have that. And so I would say, at the very least, we should get crypto up to a level of privacy that, centralized banking has.
That should be the goal. We are trying to build an ecosystem. Finance is one of the important part of it.
Absolutely. Have me.
Well, thank you so much again. For me, the key takeaway is that privacy isn't about hiding. It's about empowering everyday users, institutions, and every regulator. It builds a trust in Ethereum as a real financial infrastructure that could be compliant. Dear listeners, if you like this episode and you would want to learn more about the project and their work, check out the links in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you in the next episode as we continue exploring the project shaping the future of Ethereum ecosystem. Have a great rest of the day. Cheers.